Dear friends of the Notre Dame Newman Center for Faith and Reason, parishioners of University Church, employees and friends of Alltech, members of the Lyons family, faculties, members of faculties from around the region, Notre Dame alumni watching through the Think ND platform, and those that simply love this planet. It's my immense pleasure to welcome you to the 2021 Annual Newman Lecture, first slated for last November and delayed because of COVID. We are so pleased to be able to welcome Dr. Mark Lyons, his family, and friends to our home for this year's lecture. Instituted by the Notre Dame Newman Center in 2017, the Newman Lecture has been presented annually across a wide, diverse range of topics, bringing the lens of faith to matters of concern to society as a whole. St. John Henry Newman, the person singularly responsible for the construction of this beautiful church in which we stand, believed that a well-educated person must be able to bring a well-formed and incisive intellect to bear on the complex issues facing the modern world. Our world today stands on a precipice brought about by climate change. An effective response to the challenges that lay before us as a world community will be a complex and multifaceted approach that requires the best thinking our world has to offer, thinking that is matched by the will and determination of all peoples to see us through a future reborn. Such an effort, says tonight's speaker, must be guided by a narrative of hope. Dr. Mark Lyons has stated that it can be difficult to see the possibilities as we reflect on the responsibilities to pass on a better planet to the next generation, especially when we are surrounded by negative stories of climate change and its implications. Utilizing a fact-based approach to the challenges before us, we can embrace something much stronger than optimism. We can have hope, a bold and confident expectation as we face the future. The stories we share shape the solutions we can envision. So let's turn the page, he says, on a new parable for our planet. Mark Lyons now serves as president and CEO of Alltech, a company in which he has been immersed his whole life. As a young boy, he would travel with his father, Alltech founder Pearse Lyons, on visits to customers. Over the years, he has worked in nearly every department of the company and locations around the globe. This immersion has given him a deep and uniquely personal knowledge of the company, as well as needs and challenges facing diverse populations around the world. Believing the Alltech motto that agriculture has the greatest potential to shape the world's future, Mark launched the Planet of Plenty in 2019, calling for collaboration to improve nutrition, human and animal well-being, and the preservation of natural resources. He has spearheaded many of the company's critical projects, including the creation of Alltech's flagship yeast production facility in São Pedro, Brazil, and the rebuilding of the company's solid-state fermentation plant in Serdan, Mexico. Moving to China in 2012, Lyons sought to build bridges between that nation and the wider agricultural industry through research, education, and strategic initiatives. A former board member of the American Feed Industry Association, Lyons serves on the board of directors for Transylvania University in Lexington and the advisory board for women in food and agriculture. He's active in many national and international industry groups, serving as vice president of the Soil and Fertilizer Alliance of China and a committee member of the China Toxicology Association. I don't know what he does in his spare time. Having published papers and patents in areas ranging from enzyme production to global economics, I know theology. All of these are just words to me. Lyons is interested in the assurance of food safety and quality through the entire food chain. He was named as one of the top 50 Irish businessmen and women in the BRIC countries, an economic bloc of countries consisting of Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and 40 under 40 leaders in agriculture by Vance Publishing. Receiving a bachelor's degree in political science and environmental science from the University of Chicago, Lyons went on to receive a master's degree in brewing and distilling and a PhD in solid-state fermentation from Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. He is fluent in Spanish, Portuguese, French, and German, and English. and he possesses a working knowledge of Mandarin. The Notre Dame Newman Center for Faith and Reason is excited to hear from this man who has such a unique vision of the future and the world. The church must foster meaningful discussion of and appropriate action concerning our climate issues, especially its impact on human populations, especially the world's poor, and the well-being of the earth itself. All serious voices, reasonable assessments, and possible solutions must be entertained by governments, business, and the academy, working together if we are successfully to meet the crises we face. Friends, with no further ado, Dr. Mark Lyons and a new parable for the planet.
Thank you, Father Gary. This is truly a great honor and something very, very special to many of us. I'll just briefly, for those of you not so familiar with our company, give you a very brief overview. This is called a parable. I was just commenting that it is interesting when you give a title to a talk 3 months, 4 months before you give it. It's always an interesting experience. So hopefully we're going to share with you a few stories and some things that could be useful to you just through some of the things that we have been experiencing and the mission that we have of working together for a planet of plenty. Alltech is a family-owned business. My parents founded it in 1980, and our business is focused on providing more safe, more sustainable, smart solutions for agriculture. Simply said, that basically means that we are improving the efficiency of food production, at the same time overcoming some of the challenges that we face from sometimes policymakers and also consumers, and responding to those changes faster than perhaps would be without Alltech's involvement. And so, it's an interesting space. The food space is something where there's a lot of focus right now. We were chatting with our friend Professor McLaughlin earlier, and he was saying that the flood of students into this space is considerable. There's also a lot of investment. It's not always into traditional agriculture in many regards. I think because of a lot of negative press around agriculture, there's a lot of money coming in thinking of new ways to produce food. And of course, we know this is a very hot topic in media and a very important topic here in Ireland, a country that is so important in terms of food production, and a country that is able to produce such high quality food. And so I think with hopefully what we could discuss today, there's a little bit about how we are operating as a purpose-driven company and how we believe that this can be something that can be impactful, hopefully, for the future of our planet, food production, and hopefully for you personally as well. It's a great honor and privilege to be in this space and to be back in Ireland. Our family is Irish. It's interesting that I was noted as one of the top Irishmen in a BRIC country, where I'm not living in one now, and I think that you can kind of sense the diaspora, as we call it, of Irish people around the world. They're gonna pick anyone they can get to Orla. But I was in China. We definitely were waving the Irish flag there. In my time in China, I lived there for 6 years. We had a great relationship with the embassy. But of course, I've actually never lived in Ireland. I'm probably one of the most frequent visitors. I think the longest I ever was outside of Ireland, I was probably 9 months, up until the pandemic. And so for somebody who's never lived here, we have a very close connection. And in fact, we were very, very happy the other day to be visiting, and we're able to go and visit the beautiful Botanic Gardens. This is very different than a normal Alltech presentation. I'm actually just going to give you photos. So you can see the shock and horror of our colleagues here up front. But this is a beautiful place, and it really brought home to me so much of what is special in this country, and the greenery, the history, the storytelling as we traveled around and went through the beautiful, beautiful gardens. My mother grew up right across the street there in Glasnevin, and you could clearly see from what we saw where she got her love of nature and her eye for design. So really, Ireland is a very, very beautiful and very special place, a truly blessed place. So Cardinal Newman, there are many of you in this room who know more about him than I do, but a very interesting gentleman moved over from England, converted to Catholicism, and really had this mission, in a way, to change the way really we engage with religion. And he had this belief that you had to understand the spiritual the theological, but you also had to understand the intellectual. And this was the only way that you would have a wholeness of knowledge. And this balance between the two is something that really spurred on after his death. The beginning, the first Newman Center over at the University of Pennsylvania in 1908. Today, across American universities, there are so many Newman Centers. This is really something that has been taken on. And I think it's really important and quite important when we think about the topic we have today, because so much of what he was doing is really the way we need to be responding today. And be thinking in these two elements. And this is, I think, the only way to really overcome some of the challenges that we have in front of us. This is actually not my first speech in this building. I was here once before speaking on behalf of somebody very special, my sister. And she loved this place. It was a place that was really special to her. She would be normally up there playing her violin, playing some beautiful music with people that she loved. And it was certainly a place that she found a great sense of solace, and I think somebody who had tremendous empathy. She would be giving a heck of a talk today if she was given this topic. And so still today, many of the things that she did within our organization, really tapping into the way we think about our colleagues, the love we have of our people, and the way we take care of them, very much came, from the types of things she did. And she still is very much an inspiration to me every day as I lead our family business. So I think being back here also, though, it was interesting to think of a time when I was a very young boy, and I think, Mom, you remember those times where I thought I might be up here every week. And so there was a time, and I think for many of us, maybe we thought we would go into some sort of religious service. I thought I would be a priest, and my great aunt, Auntie Eileen, our only relative in the United States, was very fond of this idea. And every time we would see her, she would ask me, "Mark, are you still going to be a priest?" At some point I figured out, Dad, he's a boss. I want to be a boss. But I still might do this priest thing because, she likes it. And so she asked me one day, she came down and visited us during one of the holidays, "Mark, are you still going to be a priest?" And I said, "No, I'm going to be the Pope." Now, I thought this was quite a unique experience. And I said to my friend Damien there, "Would you give us a ride into town?" And there I am telling him a little bit about the talk tonight, and he said, "I was going to be the Pope too." So it's actually quite fortunate that neither of us went into the priesthood, because one of us would have disappointed Damien, and I'm sorry for you. But it's certainly very special, and something I think that was a real challenge in thinking about today's talk, because it is something, Father Gary's up here every week sending a message, communicating with people. The way we do that within our business is quite different. We sometimes are challenged with the same types of communication elements, but ultimately, I think it's a very special thing to take on that role. So I didn't follow perhaps in the priesthood, but I did follow in my father's footsteps, and I was able to have the opportunity to get involved with our business. And when I think back and I think of some of our favorite quotes, I would say, because I don't think I'm speaking for myself, from my father, he was a tremendous speaker, and certainly one that always resonates with us is "do what makes your heart sing." And I think that this was something that he was able to connect with so many people, inspire so many people with that message. But before he actually said that, as he was talking about driving and finding your purpose, he talked about when you have a why, you find the how. When you have your purpose, you will continually find ways to bring that about. And I think that aspect of making sure, as we think about big issues of climate change, do we know our purpose as individuals? Do we know our purpose as organizations? And can we make that connection between the two? Purpose is one of the driving forces today of successful businesses. We see a complete separation, a complete change of all of the different trends that were taking place, I think, before the pandemic. This is one that is truly speeding up, and we are seeing a separation of companies that are putting profit first and companies that are putting people and the planet first. And this is a complete transformation, and something that is very challenging, I think, for a lot of executives to deal with. But purpose really fundamentally starts with our people. And if you're not connected with your people, it's going to be impossible to achieve anything. We have to move forward and cannot move forward without people who understand their purpose, understand the purpose of the organization, and where they're going. Many of my conversations with my father around leadership focused on responsibility and opportunity. He would continually drill into me, Mark, one day you're going to have a responsibility of 6,000 families. It wasn't the idea of thinking about the P&L. It wasn't the importance of how we were going to grow. It was the responsibility that we had to our people. One thing we talked a lot about was, in life, when presented with the opportunity to lead, what will you do? Leadership is never isolated to a role or a title. It's truly something that should be throughout an organization. It's infused in everything we do in life. My father sought to cultivate this within his team. He loved to lead by example, sometimes way far ahead, sometimes we caught up, sometimes we're still on the way. But he also loved to work within the communities, and I think he was happiest when he saw that. We recently had a chance to take a trip down and into a place that was very important to me. It was mentioned earlier, I lived in Mexico. And the place there, in a little town, Serdan, Mexico, 10, 15,000 people. Tom in the back visited us once there. And I found over the years, my father loved going there. There wasn't a great need. It was an operating plant. They did everything well. But he would even show up, sometimes even showing up, leaving the van door open and leaving the van running as he was landing in one place, traveling an hour to see these people and back. Later on, he figured out he could also take a helicopter. And it was simply to go there and see the impact they were having in the community. Over 20 different projects operating in that place. And I think what was really special was this past year we created the 7 values of Alltech. And the value of making a difference, perhaps the thing that was most important to him, was won by that team down there in Mexico. I would truly say that he was the best version of himself in his last days. And we saw this in so many different ways as he really, I think, got to the point where that aspect of wisdom and experience really crystallized, and he truly saw what was most important in life, what was most important to him. So of all the leadership lessons, as I was thinking about this, that really resonated with me, there were 3. Leadership is a love of your people. In a crisis, we've had a few recently, a leader must not panic. And thirdly, make a difference. What is your dash? If you go out to the office, the Alltech Ireland office, European headquarters there in Dunboyne, there is a beautiful tablet there with this poem called The Dash that my father loved. It was in the front of his daytimer. And he'd come across it first when a very dear friend of his, the first salesperson in Alltech, Bill Cheek, passed away. And the story essentially is about the 2 dates, the date you were born, the date you pass away, and this thin little line that's in the middle, that dash. And ultimately, what are you going to do with that dash? How do you make a difference? And I think through that poem and through his experiences, he really started to see that was ultimately what life was about. 4 years since losing him, we've obviously suffered through a pandemic. We've been separated. We've had to delay important talks like this one, but we've missed out on that opportunity of being together. We've also now, what I would say, a senseless and selfish war, very much focused on one or a few individuals. We have a climate crisis, a climate challenge that has become even more obvious, more clear, and more extreme. We need to have purposeful actions, and we need to have many purposeful individuals and companies moving things ahead. So thinking about this talk and reflecting a little bit on this discussion, I thought, well, I decided not to be the Pope, I suppose, but we ended up with a pretty good one. I'm quite fond of this guy, and I watched a documentary that some of you may have seen, A Man of His Word, where Pope Francis talks about a lot of different things going on in the world. He was the first Pope to talk about climate change. He was the first, or he's very much somebody who is constantly talking about inequality and talking about the separation that we have between rich and poor. and how in his home country in Argentina, he was shocked that at one stage in the 70s, suddenly he went out to see a friend, and there were fences around the neighborhood that his friend had lived in. And he started to see the separation of society. He talks about 3 T's, and this works only in Spanish. Techo, tierra, and trabajo. So the 3 T's of work, of having a roof over your head, and of land. And that those really should be things that everybody has the dignity to have in their lives. That these are basic human rights, and that without these, we truly cannot live as a free society. In the documentary, he talks about how with so much technology, wealth, and access to education, we are divided by what we believe is true, controlled by self-interests, and separated by a lack of empathy. Today, we have amazing technology that gives us the ability to be connected as never before. But that very technology is separating us, feeding the darker sides of the human spirit. We have greater living standards than we've ever had, yet inequalities are the greatest they've ever been and continuing to grow. We have better access to education. You can see it in this country. Incredible, the education system that we have in Ireland. But where is the wisdom? In many metrics, the world is better than it's ever been. But are we the best we've ever been? We are always restless, anxious, never satisfied. We want more, we want it cheaper, and we want it faster. If we step forward a little bit more, one of the biggest crises we have today is truth. What is truth? Well, the same question was asked by a very cynical Pontius Pilate over 2,000 years ago. This skepticism and this lack of a shared and certain set of facts is undermining trust, it's undermining communities, and even our best form of government, democracy. So, perhaps there's never been a more important time when impact, the role, and the purpose of a company within society has played such a significant role. It's been called into question under great scrutiny, but yet the potential for positive impact of an organization has never been so great. In a conversation that we've had recently that's going to feature in our One conference, and you might see some of the little postcards that have been put out. This is the real highlight of the Alltech year. It's the Chinese New Year, it's the Easter, it's the Christmas all into one, and we're going to hold it in 3 weeks. We had the opportunity to connect with a gentleman, Paul Pullman. He was the CEO of Unilever for 10 years, really brought about incredible change and a purposeful journey within their organization. And he stated, increasingly, CEOs are required to meet a broader range of societal needs, working at levels that society expects them to do, that they've never done before, and that this is going to be an extraordinary challenge for executive teams. Having opinions about broader environmental issues, societal issues, and being involved in broader partnerships. He calls for systemic change in the way we operate and how companies interact with society. And I think that's exactly the type of thing that we have to be challenging ourselves with. We've had such a difficult time over the last couple of years dealing with change, and that change is only going to speed up. But being sustainable, the very essence of that word basically means status quo, staying in the same place. What we can see with the world we have around us today, that's not going to be enough. Right now, this time calls us to do much, much more. We must have a positive impact on our planet. We must have a positive impact on our societies. We were meant to tend and care for the garden that we were given. This is actually a divinely appointed responsibility. In Genesis, the Hebrew translation of God's command to humanity was to serve and protect the garden. We are to cultivate the good, abad, and keep it from evil, shamar. This garden should prosper in our hands. That is what we are called to do. As caretakers, we are to value creation, people, animals, plants, and the planet, far more than for what it can achieve for us, but because these things are good and because they are God's. We should promote and help flourish all of life on this planet, actively pursuing its revitalization and its restoration. This is the ethos right at the core of our mission of working together for a planet of plenty. This is a mission we've been on for the past 3 years, and so much of what captures this idea is something that has truly galvanized those 6,000 people within our company. Part of this, I think, is because it's authentic. It's connected to the past of our business, but it's also something that is very ambitious, has deep roots within our organization, and has a strength, I think, within it that truly can attract people. This really is connected to a time, a long time ago, where my father was talking about a similar idea we call the ACE principle. At a time when the world was simply thinking about producing a plentiful amount of very cheap food, he started to talk about how we needed to connect at a higher level. We needed to think about the well-being and the health of the animal. We needed to think about those needs of the consumer. He was a voracious reader, typically of things that were not necessarily in his circle. And we also needed to be thinking about the environment. What makes this so impactful was that he was thinking of these things in the late 1980s, way ahead of his time. So that truly was the North Star of Alltech. And in March 8th, 2018, I inherited my father's legacy. The first thing, of course, was the commitment to our people, our colleagues, our customers, and our communities, which we call our 3 Cs, something that has guided us, especially through the past years. I also took on our commitment to the ACE principle and our commitment to make a difference. He had a beautiful speech that none of us had heard almost up until he passed away. I had the incredible experience of watching it with him in the hospital, where he shared those words with us. It's not about making money, it's about making a difference. His final words to us were, "We have so much more to do." So, in many regards, and thinking perhaps, Father Gary, trying to reach back to days when I might have thought I'd be a priest, today it came to me the story of the talents. I was given 5 talents. And in that way, I needed to decide what I would do. Would I bury these talents? Would I go with the status quo of sustainability? Would we continue on the way we'd gone in the past? Or would we invest those talents and think about things in a new way? So when that moment had come, it was a new moment for Alltech. It was a new moment, of course, for me. I think it was a new moment, potentially, for our potential impact on our society and on our planet. It was mentioned in the intro, quite a long intro. I think I'm going to need to edit that one down. Might have been kicked off a couple of those committees. Maybe the Chinese ones. Certainly, I did have a great opportunity to travel with my father, to live in a lot of different places, and I think from a personal perspective, that journey really showed me that different parts of the world need different things. In some parts of the world, it's simply about having enough. In other parts of the world, we're looking for things that are much, much more aspirational, and we're thinking about our needs in very different ways. And so as we looked at this and we started to think about where we were going to go, some of that aspect and some of that challenge really came to focus. And those moments with my father, a lot of things crystallized, and speaking with my wife, really started to discuss what is it that we want to do with our lives? Where do we want to go? And how are we going to proceed forward? So, in many regards, when you think about some of the challenges of climate change, of a growing population, of a population that will reach 9 billion people and beyond, what we need to be doing as an industry is producing enough nutrition, harmonious with nature, harmonious with our planet. In many regards, Alltech, being a private company, a small company, a nimble company, was well suited to these needs and the demands of our planet and the demands of our industry. So we knew what our why was. We knew the why of Alltech, I knew and Holly knew our why within our lives. And from this, we would find that how, that message of working together for a planet of plenty. This vision deepened and clarified our purpose and Alltech's purpose for being. My father was a tremendous entrepreneur. There were so many different aspects of the business. It became increasingly difficult and challenging for our marketing people to explain what is it that Alltech does. This message and this bigger purpose as an organization not only pulled us together, but clarified where we were going. We believe that agriculture does have the greatest potential to positively impact the future of our planet. Together, we can produce nutrition for all, we can revitalize rural economies and give them more opportunities, and we can replenish our planet's natural resources. The Planet of Plenty is all about multiplying those talents that we were given. It's not about the status quo of sustainability. It's a call for collective courage and deep impact. Agriculture has so much that it can do, and so much it must do. There truly is a blue ocean of opportunity to make improvements. We can improve the nutrition of animals, allowing them to thrive, be more productive, and use less resources and have a lower impact on our planet. The soil beneath us is a true gift. We can nourish the microbiomes within it. We can reduce the amount of chemical pesticides, fertilizers that are required through natural means, working with the planet, not trying to harness it and work against it. And with land management, we can contribute to enhance biosecurity. And I think the most powerful thing, we are one of the few industries that can actually actively capture carbon. We can create the greatest carbon sink that exists, of course, the soil. And so creating more soil, capturing carbon that has been put into the atmosphere through other means, through the use of fossil fuels, agriculture holds the key to turn things around. But this will take a complete system change, a completely different way of thinking, and different incentives for the entire industry and really entire system to work together. What we are seeing is that we must align the food chain, we must align policymakers, and we must incentivize the right activities. We are witnessing these things firsthand. We have an amazing story that we're going to be sharing at our One conference about an operation in Florida called Buck Island. And there, what we are seeing within a nature preserve is cattle that are moving around, that are operating within that system, and scientists working on the nutrition, working alongside ecologists. This is exactly the type of future that we need to be thinking about. Through the programs that we've been able to put in place, feeding the right types of minerals, changing certain elements of the diet, we are improving the well-being of these animals, we're improving their fertility, we're improving the health of their calves, we're producing more profit also for the producers that can be put into further regenerative activities. But the most important and most exciting part is what's happening in the soil. What we're actually seeing is a significant increase in terms of grass growth, and through grass growth, significant increase in carbon capture. It's estimated at this point it's between 20 and perhaps as high as 50%. What could we do here in Ireland with that type of technology? How could we deploy this type of approach to truly, ultimately, have farms that are not only producing meat, milk, and eggs, but are also producing energy that are capturing carbon? To try and achieve these things, we need some of these great examples. We also, of course, need a different way of approaching things. So we have the science, we have the technology to make a planet of plenty possible. We've seen in the past that we've been told that this planet can only house a billion people. Then it was up to 2 billion. Now it's over 7 billion. The capabilities and the ways that humans can constantly adapt and survive, that can innovate, keeps increasing that amount. But something is different today. What is different is that our impact on our planet has changed, and we must be thinking of these things in a different manner. But no matter how much we have, I think we all know, as human beings, that there is ultimately a vice that undermines all of this. There will never be enough there will never be plenty, no matter how much we produce, until consumers finally say, "I've had enough." The demands of consumers constantly increases. In Proverbs, it says, "The righteous has enough to satisfy their appetite, but the belly of the wicked suffers want." So in this regard, this is where the scientist and the clergyman must come together and must walk together, because ultimately we need that change. Science cannot make human beings content. We may have a full table before us, but that will never make us grateful, satisfied, or fill the bottomless cravings of a restless soul. We have to connect with our people first and change the way they are thinking. In this, I think there has to be some work of God, some spiritual work that enables us to receive every good thing as a gift and perceive plenty as an occasion, not for grasping, but an opportunity for gratitude and even for generosity. My wife spent a good amount of time in Africa, and she shares with me something that I think is pretty powerful. You can say hello to somebody and you can ask them how they're doing, and they'll respond by saying, "I have enough for today," showing that they are satisfied, that they are contented, and that they are happy. I think we need to learn a little bit of that type of thought process and that idea of having enough. The planet of plenty is possible. I think we can be very confident of this. But it begins with each of us. It requires a change in terms of how we engage with our resources, how we consume them, how we produce them, and how we interact with each other. Instead of taking hold of what we feel is ours and pulling it close, we need to have an open hand to give and to collaborate. So when we think of these big ideas and we think of what potentially is possible in an industry potentially that is flipping around and changing climate change and perhaps putting this in the rearview mirror of humanity, sometimes it seems extraordinarily daunting, and it seems like something we will never achieve. And I was speaking with a friend the other day, and they mentioned the Nelson Mandela quote, "It never seems possible until it's done." And I think that's the courage we need in terms of this mission that we're on to push forward. Progress is being made, and a bright future can give us hope. But there is much work to be done. So thinking about a few conclusions and a few challenges perhaps to you. First and foremost, what is your purpose? Do you know your purpose in your life? Do you know it within your business? Finding your purpose, and if you're so inclined, if you think this way, what God's purpose might be for you, think about that. Finding what makes your heart sing is very difficult, but at the same time, extraordinarily rewarding and worthwhile. I also think we should think about leadership, the type of leadership that we're seeing around us, and what we want leaders to be like. What type of leaders do you want to emulate? What behaviors should they exhibit? Taking time to reflect on this and realizing that each of us is a leader somehow in our lives, within our communities, within our families, is crucially important. We need to try and create more leaders that emulate those types of behaviors. And finally, is the world better because you are in it? Is it better because your organization exists? How can you make this impact even more positive? How can you play a role to overcome so many of the challenges that we have as a planet, as one community? We have to think truly as that global community, even at a time where there is so much separation. It's going to start with a small group that think of things in that purposeful manner and pull together. So Father Newman believed that it'll take the theologian and the scientist to work together. In that same documentary, the Pope talks about the same thing. He says you could never study theology today without studying science. You can't have conversations about theology without science. And I think that's exactly where things are ultimately going to end up. Within our Planet of Plenty message, we talk very much around this. that we have to have that impact with people through everything we're doing around sustainability. We have to have that science, but we also have to be able to connect with people through storytelling. And that's what the 3 leaves of our logo stand for, with our mission of working together for a planet of plenty. We always talk about those words on top actually being far more important, because we will achieve nothing on our own. We have to work with others. And this is a mission that isn't simply ours as a company, it's something that's much, much bigger. So to overcome those challenges, we do need to come together. But I truly believe that what we believe and what we dream, we can do. So thank you. I hope that some of that was helpful, and I'd love to take any questions if I think Father Gary had several himself, so we may just go with his. Thank you.
Oh, I do. Katie will be walking around with a microphone. We ask you to not ask a question unless you're speaking into it, because we do have people watching at home and who will be viewing later. But we do ask, we only have time for a few questions, but that if you ask one, to please keep it short and direct so that Mark can answer it. Thank you.
Thanks a million for that. 2 short questions. One is, you mentioned your dad talking about do what makes your heart sing, I think is what you said. In parishes, Catholic parishes, climate change doesn't necessarily make congregations' hearts sing. You know, it's often difficult to motivate people to engage in the kind of cooperation you're talking about. I wonder, have you had any experience of working with communities of faith? And the other question I have is in terms of agriculture. Certainly in Ireland, the discussion is often between the move towards using land and agriculture to move towards a vegetarian future rather than an animal-based future. Have you any thoughts on that equation?
Yep. No, thank you very much. So I think, in terms of our interaction, with faith communities, I think it's very much connected to our colleagues and what they're doing. I know in a lot of the places that we operate in, of course, faith is a very, very important part of life. But I think to a certain degree, perhaps with anything with religion, I think passing things up to a higher being is really where we have to think these are daunting and incredible challenges. And we have to have faith within the fact that these challenges that we're being given, we have the capabilities. And I really enjoyed, again, what the Pope talked about in terms of the incredible capabilities that we have, and that we were kind of created as an imperfect entity, an imperfect being, to continue to learn and work together. And through that scientific knowledge and understanding that we have changed a lot of things. And we now have the visibility, and I think the broader acceptance that climate change exists. When I went to school, all the science was there, it was very clear, but the level of acceptance was very, very low. And I think that is in maybe any small way a solace in the fact that you see a lot of movement, you see a lot of people thinking about things in that manner. The question about changing diets, I think, is very important. We would feel that animal protein and protein in general is we don't have sufficient enough in the world. And so there's a lot of different ways to see how do we produce more protein, and at the same time, how do we make sure that we are reducing environmental impact. Having said that, 86% of what goes to ruminant diets would not be able to be utilized by humans. And so this binary discussion we have around veganism potentially and eating meat isn't quite as simple, because a lot of these materials either wouldn't be utilized, would be broken down by microorganisms, perhaps even creating greenhouse gases. We have to think back, and I had a fascinating trip just as the pandemic was ending out to Montana. And we were able to visit some of the places that at one point were abundant with bison. There would have been 50, 60, 70 million bison all across the entire United States, and they would have been living in a harmonious natural cycle. if you think about that system that exists, and then you think today, we have far fewer animals, probably a tenth of that, on that same landmass. And so I think the impact that agriculture has been purported to have is much larger in the media than it is in reality. Food waste actually makes up a bigger impact on our planet and creates more greenhouse gases than animal livestock production. And so it's going to be something that takes, I think, a nuanced approach. And we also have to realize that we're taking a lot of materials, again, that we wouldn't utilize, and we're creating highly nutritious protein out of this material. So can we improve and must we improve? Absolutely. But I think at the same time, animal protein is critical for so many of those over 7 billion people on our planet, and I think it will be in the future. I think ultimately people will have different approaches and different decisions, and I think that's a little bit of this changing aspect of where people sit within their expectations. Of course, animal welfare is a crucial issue, but I think that when we get into the science of it and we start to understand things better, we have to do a better job communicating the role and importance that the animal industry has on our nutrition and also, candidly, on our planet, because it's the cycle that actually makes things work. It's the fact that there is animals on that farm in Florida that means that we're getting the increase in carbon capture. So it's counterintuitive a little bit, but we're actually capturing far more carbon than we're actually emitting through animal production, if we're doing it the right way. It's a very important question.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask you, what are some of the practical ways that your company kind of integrates like local wisdom and knowledge from the communities that you work with, especially, typically marginalized communities that you might work with? Like, how do you integrate wisdom and ideas from them in a practical way in such a large organization?
Yeah, I think a lot of that, I mentioned my father's zeal for a lot of community projects that we do. Those are hyper-localized. So Alltech operates in 350 communities. All of those are, these are across over 90 countries. And in those places, our people are truly local. In each of those, we encourage them to do some sort of social projects to integrate and connect with the local community. And those are the places I think we have the most meaningful conversations, working with community leaders, realizing what the real needs are in those locations, and creating projects that make sense, and also tremendously impact our people. One of the most important aspect of that element of the business is how people are transformed through potentially service, how they work with those communities, and it isn't simply about writing a check, right? It's the effort, it's the impact that we have. And so that's an increasing area of importance to us. So I think it's very much at that local level. I would say it's probably even more so with our operations, our operational sites, our production facilities. We have over 80 of those around the world, and those are the people where I think the rubber really hits the road. It tends to be places where you have more people, so the impact in terms of employment is greater and the connection with the communities is greater. Where it's simply a commercial function, sometimes we're a little bit further away and we're much more involved with the industry. Having said that, we've had a tremendous number of projects with some of our customers, and the vast majority of our customers employ, at least in a local presence, many more people than we do. And so some of those projects, doing those projects together with another company, that's very exciting because it really can transform the way we're thinking about things. And even this Planet of Plenty message, we have several Planet of Plenty partners. And so with those companies, we're truly making an embedded partnership and collaboration. And I think that's an exciting area. But it's a fast-growing and fast-changing space, and the discussion with Pullman focused very much around that as well, that we have to be engaged with a lot more community leaders, far more. In Kentucky, we're looking at some projects. Obviously, you probably saw, those of you in Ireland, that we had a lot of social justice issues that came out, obviously, through the last summer and the previous 6 months. And those are areas within the local community that we're looking at what we can do, talking to policymakers, NGOs, talking to the police force, thinking about projects we can do. How do we utilize some of the spaces we have that might be out of urban centers to be able to help individuals at risk and create programs around that. So it's what I like about the approach we have is that things are not top-down, they're very much delegated out. The values are the same across the organization, but the way that we implement and the way that we operate is local.
I think we have time for one more.
I think behind you.
Thanks very much. I liked your talk. It was very illuminating. I just wondered, like, if a man wants to get into doing what you're doing, or at least work with you, especially in Ireland, like, you know, how could we do this, or how can somebody like myself get in touch with you to try and do? It's something that I wanted to do, but like obviously I'm working from the ground up, you know. So, but like I just thought I'd ask, considering that you're here in front of me. So I thought I'd ask. Thanks very much. It was a lovely talk.
Yeah, so if I understood it correctly, you were saying, how would somebody get involved, or somebody in you know, if somebody was so inclined in moving this direction? I think, you know, ultimately, I think that there's so many opportunities out there, and it's a little bit of what we're trying to do as well, is how do we open up space for people to get involved in projects, that these shouldn't be things that are simply limited to, you know, one company or organization or industry, and having more dialogue and more openness. We held for several years an event. It was good fun. Some people came for information. Some people just came for beer. It was called News and Brews. And I thought that was always a fantastic engagement, because we brought an open group, just like this. It was who wants to come, and we would have a lecture, and we would have an interesting topic. But out of that came a lot of conversations and people coming together and saying, hey, I'd love to work on a project or work on something. And I think creating more of those opportunities is good. But look, I think all of these types of things, it starts with an individual commitment to saying, I want to have an impact, I want to have a purposeful approach. But I think it's a great question, because it's also inherent upon us to think about how can we create those opportunities. So I think that's a good one for us to take on.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank Mark Lyons once again for his talk. This is a great opportunity for us here at Newman University Church and the Notre Dame Newman Center to engage our own faith and to begin to think outside of what one normally thinks of as the realm of faith. And we have to, as much like you speak and your dad has spoken of, we have to start thinking, for those of us who are Catholic and Christian, about the impact our lives have in the world. It is the dash. This is the second of 3 talks we're giving this this spring. The first was a small one last week on sex trafficking. We have this on the parable, new parable for the planet. And at the end of June, we'll be taking up with an Irish Jesuit from Oxford the whole issue, the housing crisis here in Dublin, public policy, and the common good. So the whole notion is I may not know much about agriculture, but I might care about something else. So what do you care about? What are you willing to do? And how are you going to help make our collective world a better place? And that's what's important, and that's what we heard today, and I want to thank you for it.
Thank you.
It may come as no surprise to most of you who know him that Mark turned down our request to give him an honorarium, and we're happy to give a donation instead to the Pearse Lyons ACE Foundation to continue that good work. So thank you. Have a good night now.